So in addition to being a pastor, some of you know that I also teach moral leadership at Vanderbilt University in the fall, and I've been doing that for a number of years. And I don't do it because I have a lot of spare time on my hands. I do it because I believe in investing in the younger generation. In a recent midterm assignment that I gave them, I asked them to identify 2 challenges facing our culture that they think they might have the solutions for. And I said, talk about the solutions. What would they be? And here are some of the things that were most commonly mentioned in those papers. By the way, the hardest part about teaching is grading. I love to teach. Grading takes a lot of time. But here's what they said. Addiction to social media, which they would agree is now out of control and people don't really know when to turn it off. Second, political extremism and incivility. These students have grown up in an age of extremes where politics is a winner-take-all blood sport. Number 3, loneliness and disconnection, which seems to be an epidemic in our digital age, where people don't feel like they have any friends, they don't feel like they really know other people. The next one they said, moral decline. Character and values don't seem to matter as much as they once did. Perhaps it's not even taught early on in schools like it once was. And the last thing that they mentioned is unaffordability. Life is too expensive. If you look at what happened in the presidential election last year and again in some elections this past week in New York City and governor's races, many young people feel like they can't survive financially. Now, the solutions that they offered to these problems actually gives me great hope. They believe in dialogue with people who may disagree. They believe that limits need to be set on social media. They believe in community and surrounding themselves with friends and people who care. Most of them want to get married and have a family at some point in life. Maybe it will be a little bit later. And all of them believe that character and morality matters. And who you are is much more important than what you have. We've been in this sermon series called Embracing the Future, and we've been rolling out a vision here at Woodmont that will continue to invest in the next generation and move our church forward. And I happen to believe that the church exists in this culture to make disciples of Jesus, which allows us to address all of the problems that my Vanderbilt students mentioned in their papers. I have conservative students and I have liberal students. I have Christians and I have people that are a part of other faiths. I have students who come from wealthy families and students who don't. But from my perspective, the church will play an essential role in continuing to address these cultural challenges because the church points people to Jesus. So what we're proposing here at Woodmont will allow our church to continue to grow and thrive in the years ahead. A family life center that will be a place where people of all ages can gather and share life. The cafe will serve as a fellowship hub for our church. The new youth center will help our teenagers who are trying to find community and grow in their faith during these pivotal and difficult years. And then, of course, it will be nice to have some more parking here on this campus for Sunday mornings. Next Sunday, November 16th, we're asking our church to make a commitment and investment in this vision. And we believe that this will be transformational for our church because it will allow us to keep doing all of the important ministries that we are already doing and then some. In our text this morning, from the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about treasure. And I've told you over the years many times that Jesus didn't talk about money and possessions because he was trying to raise money. He wasn't trying to raise a church budget. He wasn't trying to build a new building. He talked about money and possessions because he knew that without question it would be the number one idol, the number one false god for human beings. Money. all the things that money can buy. And whether you have a lot of money or a little money or just enough money, we all have to wrestle with this subject on a daily basis. Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust consumes and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Then he says this, "The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness?" But he's not done. He says, "No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and wealth." I want to talk to you this morning about the things that we choose to invest in. Because every day we make decisions about how to invest our time and how to invest our money. And we read a text like this and we think, what's wrong with Jesus? Did he not like capitalism? Did he not like nice stuff? Was Jesus anti-vacation? What's his problem? How did he pay for things? Jesus was very smart. He told us to love God and love our neighbor, but he knew that what often gets in the way of this is money and stuff. So he talked about it. And sadly today, many ministers shy away from these passages, even though there's a lot of them, because they think it makes people uncomfortable. Here are some basic thoughts for you today on this passage from Matthew 6. The first one is this: how you spend your time and your money matters. You can tell a whole lot about a person by how they allocate those two things. Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." But notice the order. Not where your heart is, there your treasure will be. No, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Heart follows treasure. And I would argue that heart follows time. So if you invest in the stock market, you probably want it to go up so you can retire, right? If you invest in your kids or your grandkids' education, you want them to learn and do well. If you invest in your home, you probably want to take care of it. If you invest in a nice vacation, you probably want to relax and have some good family time. If you invest in your marriage, you want it to be fulfilling. If you invest in your friendships, you want those friends to be there for you. If you invest in Christianity, you want it to change your heart and help you grow. If you invest in the church, you want it to do well and make a difference. You see, we are constantly making decisions about how to use our time and our money. And what I'm telling you is those decisions always matter. And too many people in our culture invest in things that don't really matter. And often it's because they forget what's most important. Secondly, your priorities should dictate where your time and your money go. Meaning, you have to decide what's important and you have to rank it accordingly. Arthur Brooks teaches happiness at Harvard Business School, which surprises many people. But it's amazing how many people are successful in life. They went to a good school, they got a great job, they made a lot of money, they live a good life, but they are miserable and unfulfilled and lonely. And that's one of the things that he points out. So he tries to give these Ivy League MBA students to think about the bigger picture of life. Not just how you're going to be successful, but how are you going to be fulfilled? Because there are too many people in our world who are successful but not fulfilled. So what does that look like for us? Well, I'll give you my formula. And Arthur Brooks has actually helped me over the years with this. Faith. I want to grow closer to Christ and help others do the same. I always want to go deeper in my spiritual life. Last Sunday, I talked about the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. People who are focused on having a relationship with Christ will naturally embody these things. Maybe not all of the time, we're all human, but more of the time. But faith has to permeate every aspect of our lives. It's not just something we do on Sunday or every other Sunday. It's the way that we live. It's the lens through which we see the world. Family. Family's important. Family's important for all these babies that were just dedicated this morning. I have to say no to a lot of things to protect time with my family. My marriage is important. My kids are growing up fast. They have a lot going on. But family life has to be a priority, and we have to invest in it. That's one reason why we are working to build a family life center at Woodmont. We want families to grow together. We want Christian values to be instilled into these children. And by the way, we all just made a promise to do that. Friends. Can you name the people in your life that you would consider close friends? Do you check in on them? Do you make an effort to spend quality time with them? You know, friendships require effort, and if you quit making your friends a priority, then you won't have any friends. But remember, there's a difference between close friends and acquaintances. It's not the same thing. There is a difference between what Brooks calls real friends and deal friends. Sometimes men are good at deal friends, but we're not as good at having real friends. Meaningful work. Work has to be a priority for us, but it needs to have a purpose. We need to feel like we are making a difference and not just going through the motions. I was talking to a good friend this week, and we were saying how it feels like the work ethic in our culture is declining. A lot of people don't want to work hard. Some people work too hard and don't know when to turn it off. They don't have boundaries. But meaningful work is important, but it needs to have its limits. And the last priority that I'll lift up, at least for me personally, is self-care. What are we doing to take care of ourselves? There's a difference between self-care and self-absorption. To keep ourselves healthy and balanced, that matters. Parents, if you don't take care of yourselves, you're going to have a hard time being good parents. Those are my priorities, and I encourage you to think about yours. Third, this morning, you may have to simplify your life, meaning you may have too much going on, which keeps you from being able to focus and invest in your priorities. You know, we live in an overextended, overscheduled, busy culture where people just take on too much. And I think they do it with good intention. Last week, I mentioned a book, a really good book by John Mark Comer called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And in that book, he says, how do you know when you're not in a good place? Or how do you know when you're overcommitted and you're spread too thin? How do you know when you have what he calls hurry sickness? He gives some signs. You're irritable. You get mad, frustrated, annoyed way too easily. You're hypersensitive. All it takes is a minor comment to hurt your feelings. You're restless. When you actually try to slow down and relax, you can't. You're a workaholic. You work around the clock and don't know when to stop. You're emotionally numb. You don't have the capacity to feel the pain of another person. Your priorities are out of whack. And life becomes reactive and not proactive. You don't take care of your body. You don't sleep or exercise or eat well. You show escapist behaviors, overeating, overdrinking, overshopping, too much trashy Netflix. You slip in your spiritual disciplines. They make their way out of your schedule: quiet time, scripture, prayer, Sabbath, family dinners. And the last thing that he said is you isolate. You feel disconnected from God and disconnected from your soul. If you have these symptoms on a regular basis, it might be time to simplify your life and align your energy and your money and your focus with the things that really matter. Final thought this morning. All of us, as we think about the future, we have to live in the present, but we also have to see the future. Meaning, we have to know where we want to go and how we plan to get there. You know, when you're a leader, you get criticized. Not everybody likes the project we're working on. That's okay. You get criticized when you lead. You get second guessed. You get challenged. But nobody has ever accomplished anything great without looking down the road. You see, at Woodmont, we've been thinking down the road. We've been asking ourselves, what do we need to do over the next 5 years to make sure that this church remains healthy and vibrant? So we had a visioning process, and now we're executing it. And we're asking for your help next week. This vision is important. It's going to transform our church. It's going to transform this corner. And we need you to be a part of it. But you have to have a vision in life of where you want to go in your work, in your family, in your marriage, in your faith, in your relationships. And then once you set the goals, you have to work really hard to achieve those goals. And people will doubt you, and they will criticize you, and they will tell you you're crazy, but you have to keep going. I love that famous quote that I'm pretty sure is attributed to Teddy Roosevelt, who once said this: "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man or woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows that in the end, the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Pretty strong. Next week, let's move this church forward in faith. Let's invest in the things that matter in this life. And then let's see what God has in store in the years that are to come. Amen.